One thing I never used to experience is something very common in the online video maker spaces was distaste for my former work. Many creators said that they could not really watch any of their own old videos. They found them distasteful. They hated watching themselves on camera, and that never really happened with me. I don't know what it was, or I didn't for a very long time, but I had no problem watching my old videos. That changed a few years ago. I imagine you can guess why. And what I found is that more so than the dysphoria, although that is a factor, I'm much more uncomfortable with the type of critic I used to be. I did not start this as an actual literary critic. I came at it much more from I'm going to be a comedian entertainer, like the nostalgia critic, and get my thoughts out at the same time. It'll be great, it'll be fun, and it was so fun. I have had a great time. I regret maybe like one video where I let myself get angry as an experiment. Failed, never doing that again, not very fun. But nowadays, I come out with videos much less frequently, I have less spare time, and I also have just drastically changed as a person. I was a dumb boy just out of college. I was a bit of an atheist. I've said some really shitty things about not needing feminism in the West. Oh boy, please don't watch my old videos. I've struggled with the idea of going back and remaking some of them because I did pick some decent mangas to talk about at the time. I'm never going to go back to Attack on Titan, that's too much of a beast. But there were some things that maybe I'd like another crack at. Some things that I genuinely loved but wasn't very good at expressing. And today is going to be my first attempt at that. Witches was the third manga I ever reviewed. I was not very good at it. I was still using Windows Movie Maker at the time. I had no microphone. It's unbearable. I cannot go back to that video. And also, my critique was very shallow. I treated this manga like it was just a source of really good artwork and some spooky witchy stuff for the Halloween season, and now, nearly a decade later, I've come back to it and it means so much more to me than it did then. I have often struggled with the concept of faith. I was not raised any particular religion. My mom was a Baptist, my dad was a Catholic, and neither of them were into it. So I got some VeggieTales VHSs from my more Christian-y aunts, but it was never like a thing in the household. It was always just stories. And I didn't need those stories to understand the world. Science was enough. Science had all these secrets and amazing wonders, and it still absolutely does, but as I've gotten older and transitioned, the answers are no longer sufficient. There are mysteries of the human soul and experience that cannot be explained by a math problem. And I am struggling to find answers that I am comfortable with or comfortable expressing. And witchcraft has not been my answer, but the book Witches, in 3 of its 4 stories, is explicitly about women who use long-forgotten secrets of nature passed down to them through the matrilineal line that grant them understanding of their place in the earth and power that should only be used for good. And reading it this time, it really spoke to me in a way that it didn't before. The first story is of a witch who comes back with grand powers she did not have as a child, but she is still trapped in the worldly thinking of things and possessions and revenge. And it's tragic, and she causes so much hurt and pain, but there is still a good witch to stop her. The second story is I don't know how I didn't mention this in the first video, explicitly about how the Amazon rainforest is being torn down for farmland so that we can have cheap cow meat. It's not subtle about it. It ends with the spirits of the jungle being eaten in a burger, begging to not be eaten. And the third story was the most fascinating of all to me because it sort of fuses the world of science and men thought with the world of magic and women thought. I'm not sure about the terminology there. A rock from space impacts an astronaut and brings with it the source of life that may have led to the Precambrian explosion. But now there's actually life on Earth that maybe doesn't want to be like infused with cancerous new forms of living, and a witch has to use her understanding of that power to get as close to the stone as possible and seal it away. And she has to leave behind her apprentice, and it's beautiful. These stories, this book is beautiful. The fourth story is much more about a modern woman finding her own sense of self in the modern world that has no place for the soul. It is only place for consume. There is no room for actual beauty and wonder because you cannot monetize that. And I have so many new thoughts about this. It's not just because of the estrogen unlocking my womanly emotions, although it's not because of that. It's also just because of a broadening of my perspective in the last 9 years. This book means so much more to me than it ever did when I was a dumb boy who thought he had it all figured out and was just checking out some cool stuff. I have watched more movies in the past year than probably any point in my entire life. There are so many stories and perspectives and wonderful things out there that I am so ready to experience and just wish I had the time for. This is an unscripted, unplanned, just kind of free-form thought process because I'm trying to share with you my emotions. I'm trying to share with you my perspective. Witches touched my soul and spoke to the loss of connection I have often felt to the spiritual world, and it made me happy. Maybe it can do that for you.